They thought Amara Fields was just another quiet black girl, powerless, easy to break, locked in the dark, with no food, no water, and no one coming to help. She didn't cry. She planned. Because while they were laughing, Amara was remembering every move, every face, and every weakness. They had no idea they were trapping a karate black belt. They started this as a joke, but when that locker door opened and they shoved her inside, they did something they can't undo. How far will Amara Fields go to make them pay without ever getting caught? Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The old Honda Civic rattled down the narrow country road, its faded blue paint a stark contrast to the shiny pickup trucks filling the school parking lot. Amara Fields sat in the passenger seat, her backpack clutched tight against her chest, like armor. Through the windshield, Riverside High School loomed ahead, a sprawling brick building that looked exactly like every other rural Georgia school she'd seen on the drive from Atlanta. "You've got this, baby," her mom said, pulling into a spot near the main entrance. "Just be yourself." Amara nodded, but didn't speak. Her throat felt too tight. She watched groups of students cluster around their cars, laughing and talking. Not a single face looked like hers. The halls were a maze of identical beige lockers and fluorescent lights. Amara moved carefully, keeping her steps measured and quiet as dozens of eyes tracked her movement. Some stares were openly hostile, others merely curious, but all of them made her skin prickle with awareness. In first period English, she chose a seat near the back. The teacher, Mrs. Bennett, barely glanced at her while calling roll. When Amara raised her hand at her name, a few students turned to look, then quickly turned away, whispering. By the time gym class rolled around, Amara's shoulders ached from the tension of holding herself so still and controlled. She changed in a bathroom stall rather than the locker room, pulling on baggy shorts and a loose t-shirt that hid the lean muscle underneath. "All right, everyone, give me 4 laps around the track to warm up," Coach Martinez called out, barely looking up from his clipboard. Amara started running, keeping to an easy pace. Her father's voice echoed in her head. "Control your breathing. Stay aware of your surroundings." That's when she heard them. 3 distinct male voices behind her, just loud enough to carry. "Hey, Connor, think she's trying out for the track team?" The first voice dripped with mock enthusiasm. "I don't know, Bryce. Maybe she's training for something else." Another voice, followed by snickering. "Yeah, like running from the cops." The third voice, cruel and delighted with his own joke. Amara's jaw clenched, but she kept running, maintaining her pace. She could feel them behind her, matching her speed, close enough that their shadows stretched alongside hers on the track. "What's wrong? Can't take a joke?" Bryce called out. He was tall, with the confident stride of someone who'd never had to question his place in the world. Connor, leaner and meaner-looking, made exaggerated breathing sounds. "Maybe she can't hear us over all that huffing and puffing." "Nah, she's just stuck up," Jace added, his voice carrying that particular edge that meant more was coming. "Think you're better than us, new girl?" Amara completed her laps without acknowledging them once. Inside, her heart hammered against her ribs, not from exertion, but from the effort of keeping her fists unclenched. The rest of the day passed in a blur of sideways glances and whispered comments. When her mom picked her up after school, Amara slid into the passenger seat with relief. "How was your first day, honey?" Her mom's voice was bright with forced cheerfulness. "Fine." Amara stared out the window, watching the school shrink in the side mirror. Just getting used to everything. At dinner, she pushed her food around her plate, answering her mom's questions with single words until she was excused. The garage was her sanctuary. Her father had converted half of it into a training space years ago, with mats on the floor and a heavy bag hanging in the corner. He was supposed to be finishing renovations on their new house, But Amara knew he was really staying to make sure she settled in okay. She found him there, wrapping his hands before his evening workout. He took one look at her face and held out the tape. "Want to train?" Amara nodded, taking the tape and beginning the familiar ritual of wrapping her hands. The repetitive motion helped center her thoughts. They worked in silence, kicks, punches, blocks. Her father called out combinations, and Amara executed them with precision born from years of practice. Each strike carried the weight of the day's frustrations, but she kept her technique clean and controlled. "Remember," her father said between sets, "power isn't about force, it's about timing, about knowing when to move." After an hour, sweat dripping from her forehead, Amara finally felt the knot in her chest beginning to loosen. She bowed to her father before heading inside to shower. In her bathroom, steam fogging the mirror, Amara pulled her black belt from its hook on the wall. The fabric was worn soft from years of use, the embroidered characters of her name barely visible anymore. She tied it around her waist with practiced movements, each loop and fold a reminder of who she was beneath the baggy clothes and careful silence. Looking at her reflection, Amara whispered, "Don't let them see you. Not yet." Morning sunlight streamed through Riverside High's front windows, casting long shadows across the freshly waxed floors. Amara walked through the entrance, her backpack heavy with textbooks. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, loose jeans and an oversized sweater that revealed nothing of the muscle underneath. The whispers started before she'd made it 10 steps into the building. "That's her, the new girl. Did you hear what Bryce said about her yesterday?" "Yeah, thinks she's all that." Amara kept her eyes forward, her pace steady. She'd learned young that showing reaction only encouraged them. Still, she catalogued each voice, each face reflected in the hallway windows as she passed. In chemistry, she headed for her assigned seat in the 3rd row. Just as she stepped past Connor's desk, his foot shot out. Amara saw it coming. Years of training had taught her to read body language, but she let herself trip anyway, catching herself on the edge of her desk. Snickers rippled through the classroom. Connor's smirk was reflected in the window. "Ms. Fields, please take your seat without causing a disruption," Mr. Parker said without looking up from his desk. Amara straightened, adjusted her backpack, and sat down. Her hands remained relaxed on the desktop, even as her mind recorded every detail. Connor's satisfied expression, the teacher's deliberate ignorance, the way Bryce and Jace exchanged knowing looks from across the room. The cafeteria at lunch was a careful navigation of territory. Amara found an empty table near the wall, positioning herself where she could see all the entrances. She just started eating when she felt someone approach from behind. "Oh my God, I'm so clumsy!" a high-pitched voice exclaimed as cold milk splashed across Amara's lunch tray, splattering her food and the sleeve of her sweater. The girl, one of Bryce's friends, covered her mouth in fake horror, empty milk carton dangling from her perfectly manicured fingers. "Here," she said, dropping a handful of napkins onto the mess. "Sorry about that." She wasn't sorry. Her eyes sparkled with mean delight as she sashayed back to her table, where Bryce and his friends erupted in poorly concealed laughter. Amara used the napkins to clean up methodically, her movements precise and unhurried. She could feel dozens of eyes on her, waiting for a reaction. She gave them none. Gym class was worse than yesterday. Coach Martinez had them playing volleyball, and every serve from Bryce's side of the net seemed aimed directly at her head. She dodged each one with subtle shifts of her body, making it look like luck rather than skill. "Come on, Fields," Bryce called out. "Show us what you got." "Maybe she's scared of the ball," Connor added. "Bet she's scared of everything," Jace chimed in. When a particularly aggressive spike from Bryce nearly caught her face, Amara finally spoke up. "Coach, they're aiming for my head." Coach Martinez barely glanced up from his phone. "This is volleyball, Fields. If you can't handle a little competitive play, maybe you should toughen up." The boys' laughter echoed off the gymnasium walls. Amara absorbed it all, filing away each taunt, each dismissal, each moment of calculated cruelty. After school, she walked home instead of waiting for her mom. The 3-mile journey gave her time to process, to let the mask of passive acceptance slip away. By the time she reached her driveway, her father's truck was parked outside. He was unloading tools from the bed when she approached. One look at her face, and his movements slowed, became more deliberate. "Rough day?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. Amara shrugged, reaching for one of the lighter boxes to help carry inside. Her father watched her, his expression unreadable. "Mom, working late?" she asked. "Double shift at the hospital." He paused, then added, "Garage in 20?" Amara nodded, grateful he didn't push for details. 20 minutes later, she stood on the training mats, hands wrapped, wearing her GI. Her father held the heavy bag as she worked combinations: jab, cross, hook, uppercut. Each punch carried more force than the last. "Again," he said quietly. She repeated the sequence, faster this time. Sweat began to darken the white fabric of her GI. "Again." The garage filled with the rhythmic sound of fists meeting leather. Amara's breathing remained controlled, but her strikes grew harder, sharper. Images flashed through her mind with each hit. Connor's extended foot, the milk splashing across her lunch, Bryce's smirking face, the coach's dismissal. Her father watched silently, absorbing the impact of each blow through the heavy bag. He made no comment about the increased intensity, asked no questions about what fueled this sudden fury. He simply adjusted his stance to better brace against her strikes. After an hour, when her arms burned and her GI was soaked with sweat, he finally spoke. "Your stance," he said, moving to demonstrate. "It's too wide. Tighten it up. You'll need it." Amara adjusted her feet, feeling the subtle shift in balance. Her next combination landed with even more precision. They continued training until the sun set, the garage growing darker except for the single fluorescent light above the mats. Each punch, each kick, each combination was a promise Amara made to herself. She might have to play weak at school, but here, in this space, she could be exactly who she was. Her father kept holding the bag, offering small corrections to her form, saying nothing about the tears that occasionally mixed with the sweat on her face. Friday afternoon sunlight slanted through Riverside High's west windows, casting long shadows across empty hallways. Most students had already rushed out, eager to start their weekend. Amara took her time, organizing her books at her locker. She preferred leaving after the crowds thinned out. It meant fewer accidental bumps in the hallway, fewer whispered comments. The sound of footsteps made her tense, but she kept her movements calm, methodical. "Hey, Fields!" Jace's voice echoed down the corridor. Amara didn't turn around immediately. She closed her locker slowly, counting to 3 before facing him. Jace stood a few feet away, hands in his Letterman jacket pockets, wearing that permanent smirk of his. "Coach Martinez needs help moving some equipment in the gym storage room," he said. "Told me to grab you since you were still around." Amara's eyes narrowed slightly. "Why me?" Jace shrugged, looking bored. "Something about making up for yesterday's volleyball thing. Said it would count as extra credit." He started walking backward toward the gym. "But hey, if you don't want to—" Amara hesitated. Everything about this felt wrong. Coach Martinez had never shown any interest in making things right. But if there was even a small chance this was legitimate, a chance to prove herself, to change how they saw her. "Fine," she said, adjusting her backpack. "Lead the way." The gym was eerily quiet, their footsteps echoing off the high ceiling. Late afternoon light filtered through the high windows, creating patches of shadow and brightness on the polished floor. Jace headed toward the storage room at the far end, whistling tunelessly. The storage room door was already open, darkness yawning beyond it. Amara paused at the threshold, every instinct screaming at her to turn back. "Coach?" she called out. "In here," a voice answered. But it wasn't Coach Martinez. Before she could react, hands grabbed her from behind. She recognized Bryce's cologne as he yanked her backpack off. Connor appeared from the shadows, grinning as he helped Bryce shove her toward the row of old gym lockers lining the back wall. "Let go!" Amara twisted, but they had the advantage of surprise and position. "What's wrong, Fields?" Bryce laughed, forcing her toward an open locker. "Thought you'd want a nice, quiet place to study." She struggled harder as they pushed her toward the narrow space. "Stop! You can't!" "Watch us," Connor sneered. With a final shove, they forced her into the locker. The metal door slammed shut with a hollow clang. Through the ventilation slits, she watched Jace stuff her backpack into another locker several feet away. "Have a nice weekend," Bryce called out, jamming something into the lock mechanism. "Maybe this'll teach you to know your place." Their laughter echoed as they backed away. The storage room door closed with a heavy thud, plunging everything into darkness. "Hey!" Amara shouted, pounding on the metal door. "Let me out! Someone help!" But the gym was empty. The thick walls of the storage room swallowed her voice. She kicked the door, trying to force it open, but there wasn't enough room to get proper leverage. "Help!" she screamed again, her voice cracking. "Somebody!" Nothing. Minutes passed. The darkness pressed in around her, broken only by thin strips of fading light through the ventilation slits. The space was so tight she could barely move her arms. Her chest felt compressed, each breath shorter than the last. Panic clawed at her throat. She forced it down, remembering her father's training. "Control your breathing," she whispered to herself, his words coming back to her. "Panic kills. Breathing saves." She closed her eyes, though it made little difference in the darkness. Inhale for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. Again. Again. As her breathing steadied, her mind cleared. She could feel the cold metal against her back, smell years of dust and old gym equipment. The ventilation slits let in just enough air to keep the space from becoming completely stifling. They thought they'd trapped her, thought they'd broken her, but they had no idea who she really was, what she was capable of. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper in the darkness. "I'll get out, and then I'll make you pay." The first hint of dawn crept through the high gym windows, casting weak gray light into the storage room. Amara's muscles ached from hours spent in the cramped locker, her throat raw from earlier screams that no one had heard. The night had been endless, shifting positions when her legs cramped, fighting claustrophobia, keeping her mind focused on survival instead of fear. Her hands, though numb, worked steadily at the lock mechanism. The steel loop from her belt, a self-defense tool her father had insisted she always wear, scraped against metal as she maneuvered it through the ventilation slits. Each movement was precise, despite her trembling fingers. "Come on," she whispered, sweat dripping down her face. The confined space had grown stiflingly hot as the night wore on. A metallic ping echoed in the quiet room. Something shifted inside the lock. Amara pressed her shoulder against the door, testing its give. Still stuck, but looser now. She twisted her body, ignoring the protest of stiff muscles, and braced her feet against the back panel. Years of karate training had taught her about leverage, about finding weak points. The old locker's rear panel groaned under the pressure of her legs. She pushed harder, channeling her anger into each movement. The metal buckled with a sharp crack. Light flooded in as the panel gave way. Amara tumbled out backward, landing hard on the dusty floor. For a moment, She just lay there, gulping in fresh air, her legs shaking too much to stand. When she finally pushed herself up, every muscle screamed in protest. Her clothes were soaked with sweat, her mouth so dry it hurt to swallow. Stumbling to her feet, she retrieved her backpack from the other locker. They hadn't bothered securing it as well as they had her. The gym was empty, morning light painting long shadows across the floor. Amara checked her phone. Dead battery. No way to know exactly how long she'd been trapped, but her body told her it had been hours. She needed water desperately. Moving quietly despite her exhaustion, she slipped out a side door. The morning air hit her like a shock, cool and fresh against her damp skin. Instead of heading to the main office, she turned toward home. She couldn't face questions right now, couldn't deal with administrators who'd already shown they didn't care. The walk home took twice as long as usual. Every step sent pain shooting through her cramped muscles. By the time she reached her driveway, the sun had fully risen. Her father's truck sat in its usual spot. He must have come home early from his construction job. She found him in the kitchen, coffee cup frozen halfway to his mouth, as he took in her appearance. His eyes narrowed at the bruises on her arms, the way she favored her right leg. "Amara?" His voice was carefully neutral. "I'm okay," she said, though her voice cracked on the words. He set down his cup and moved to the freezer, pulling out an ice pack without comment. When she swayed slightly, he guided her to a chair, then filled a glass with water. She drank it in long gulps while he wrapped the ice pack in a towel. "Here," he said, pressing it gently against the worst bruise on her shoulder. "You want to tell me?" Amara shook her head. She wasn't ready to speak about it. Not yet. Her father nodded, understanding in his eyes. He'd taught her enough about fighting to know sometimes you needed to process before you could plan. "Go clean up," he said finally. "I'll call you in sick today." The hot shower helped ease some of the stiffness, though dark bruises were already blooming across her skin. She changed into fresh clothes, moving carefully to avoid aggravating her injuries. In her room, Amara stood before the corkboard hanging above her desk. 3 school photos stared back at her. She'd taken them from the yearbook website weeks ago, when the harassment first started. Bryce's arrogant smile, Connor's sneering face, Jace's false innocent look. Her hands were steady as she pinned the photos in a row. Beneath each one, she added a single word in precise handwriting. Strategy. Weakness. Revenge. Sunday morning light filtered through the kitchen windows as Amara picked at her scrambled eggs. Her mom hummed while making coffee, occasionally glancing at her daughter with concern. The oversized gray hoodie hid the worst of the bruises, but Amara still winced whenever she reached for her orange juice. "Baby, you've been awful quiet since Friday," her mom said, sliding into the chair across from her. "You sure you're feeling better? Maybe we should get you checked out at the hospital." Amara forced herself to take another bite of eggs. The words sat heavy on her tongue. The truth about the locker, about the boys, about everything. But telling meant questions. Questions meant attention. Attention meant they won. "Just a stomach bug," Amara mumbled, pushing her plate away. "Dad helped me with some ginger tea yesterday. I'm good now." Her mom's forehead creased with worry, but she didn't push. "Well, take it easy today. I've got a 12-hour shift starting at noon. Your father's out in the garage if you need anything." Amara nodded, waiting until her mom headed upstairs to shower. Once alone, she cleaned her plate and walked to the garage, each step more purposeful than the last. The familiar smell of sawdust and metal greeted her. Her father stood at his workbench, organizing tools with military precision, a habit from his Marine days. The training mats they used for practice were already rolled out in the center of the concrete floor. "Dad." Her voice was steady now, certain. He turned, reading her stance before she spoke another word. "You ready to talk about Friday?" No. Amara slipped off her shoes, stepping onto the mat. But I need different training. Not defensive. Targeted. Controlled. Her father's expression didn't change, but his eyes studied her carefully. After a long moment, he nodded once. Show me your stance. For the next 2 hours, they worked in near silence. He corrected her form, adjusted her strikes, showed her how to maximize damage with minimal movement. When she stumbled, he steadied her. When her bruises slowed her down, he taught her to work through the pain. Remember, he said during a water break, control isn't just about not hitting. It's about hitting exactly how hard you mean to. Amara wiped sweat from her forehead, understanding settling deep in her bones. I know exactly how hard I mean to hit. After training, she showered and retreated to her room. Her laptop opened to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, any social media she could find. Bryce, Connor, and Jace lived their lives online, broadcasting their routines without realizing they were giving away their patterns. Bryce posted gym selfies every Monday and Thursday at 6 a.m. Connor complained about detention in room 204 during third period. Jace bragged about staying late after basketball practice on Wednesdays. She created a document, methodically noting their schedules. Bryce, football practice, Tuesday, Thursday. Works at his dad's store weekends. Gym alone early mornings. Connor, skips third period regularly. Weightlifting in empty gym during lunch. Jace, basketball practice. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Parks in far lot near trees. Their habits emerged like dots waiting to be connected. Their vulnerabilities revealed themselves in casual posts and tagged locations. Each piece of information was a weapon she could use. As evening approached, Amara pulled on her black hoodie and gloves. The neighborhood streets were quiet, most families inside for Sunday dinner. She walked slowly, memorizing the routes between school, their houses, the places they hung out. The football field where Bryce practiced. The back gym entrance Connor used to skip class. The isolated parking lot where Jace's truck always sat. Each location offered shadows, blind spots, places where justice could be served without witnesses. She traced these paths in the growing darkness, her footsteps silent, her mind calculating distances and timing. The bruises under her hoodie throbbed with each step, reminding her why she was here. Why she had to do this right. The streets held their secrets as she walked, promising dark corners and hidden moments where she could make them understand exactly how it felt to be trapped, to be helpless, to be afraid. A car passed, headlights sweeping across her. Amara kept her head down, just another teenager on an evening walk. But beneath the hood, her eyes were sharp, her mind already mapping out exactly how and where each boy would learn his lesson. Monday morning arrived with a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Amara walked through the school's front doors wearing her usual loose clothes, her face a mask of careful indifference. Her muscles were still sore from the locker, but she'd learned long ago how to hide pain behind perfect posture. The hallway buzzed with the usual morning chaos, students slamming lockers, shouting across corridors, rushing to first period. But today, she heard something else. Laughter. Specific laughter. Bryce, Connor, and Jace huddled near the water fountain, their voices carrying just enough for her to catch fragments. Locked up tight. Probably crawled home crying. Teach her to know her place. Amara kept walking, her steps measured and calm. Inside, she memorized every word, every snicker, every detail of their false confidence. She noted how Jace's laugh seemed forced, how his eyes darted around more than usual. The weak link was already showing cracks. In first period English, she sat 3 rows behind Connor, watching him brag to his friends about their prank. Her pencil moved across her notebook, but instead of taking notes on Shakespeare, She sketched out timing and locations. The back gym area after basketball practice. Dark. Isolated. Perfect. During lunch, she sat alone as usual, picking at her sandwich while observing Jace at the popular table. He always stayed late after practice on Mondays, usually the last one out. His truck would be sitting in that far corner of the parking lot, hidden by oak trees and poor lighting. Between classes, she slipped into the girls' bathroom and pulled out pink stationery she'd bought specifically for this purpose. The note had to look right. Bubbly handwriting, little hearts over the eyes, the kind of thing a cheerleader would write. She'd studied their social media posts, copying their style exactly. "Hey, Jace, I've noticed you at practice. You're amazing on the court. Would love to meet up and talk sometime. Maybe tomorrow after practice behind the gym? Don't tell anyone. I'm shy. XOXO, Katie." She knew there were 3 Katies on the cheerleading squad. The vagueness was intentional. Let him wonder which one. Let him think about it all day. During study hall, Amara timed her bathroom break perfectly, passing by Jace's locker when the hall was empty. The note slipped through the vent slots smoothly, landing where he'd find it next period. She continued walking without pause, just another student heading to the restroom. The rest of the school day passed in a blur of classes and careful observation. She noticed Jace checking his phone more often after finding the note, glancing at the cheerleaders during passing period. His confusion was obvious. None of them paid him special attention, but he kept looking anyway. After final bell, Amara headed home to prepare. The garage had become her dojo, her training ground, her preparation for justice. Her father was already there, timer in hand. 3-minute drills, he said, not needing to ask if she was ready. Focus on speed and precision. No wasted movement. They worked through takedown combinations. Grab, sweep, control. Each move had to be perfect, had to be fast enough that no one would see it coming, but controlled enough to avoid serious damage. She didn't want to permanently hurt Jace. She wanted to teach him. "Again," her father said after each round. "Tighter. Smoother. Make it count." Sweat soaked through her shirt as she practiced escapes, holds, and pressure points. The timer beeped every 3 minutes, forcing her to execute moves under strict time constraints. In a real fight, every second mattered. "Remember," her father said during a water break, "fear has a way of making people sloppy. Use that." Amara nodded, understanding the deeper lesson. Jace would be nervous tomorrow, distracted by thoughts of meeting a cheerleader. His guard would be down. His focus would be scattered. Perfect. That evening, she laid out her clothes for the next day. Another loose-fitting outfit that revealed nothing of her strength or preparation. Her black hoodie and gloves were hidden in her backpack, ready for tomorrow night. The next morning, Amara arrived at school early, watching students filter in through the front doors. She spotted Jace at his locker, checking his hair in a small mirror he thought no one noticed. His nervousness was obvious in the way he kept glancing at passing cheerleaders, trying to figure out which Katie had written the note. Between second and third period, she timed her path to cross his in the hallway. As they passed each other, she turned her head slightly and whispered, just loud enough for him to hear, "Tonight." The squeak of basketball shoes echoed through the empty gym as Jace ran his final drills. Sweat darkened his practice jersey, his breathing heavy in the hollow space. Coach had left an hour ago, telling him to lock up when he finished. The rest of the team was long gone. He glanced at his phone. 7:45 p.m. Katie should be here soon. The thought made him grin despite his exhaustion. He'd spent all day trying to figure out which cheerleader had written the note. Maybe it was Katie Martinez. She'd smiled at him in Spanish class. Or Katie Chen from the competition squad. The mystery had driven him crazy. The gym lights hummed overhead as he gathered his gear, stuffing his practice clothes into his duffel bag. His footsteps echoed as he walked to the light panel, flicking the switches off one by one. Darkness crept in from the corners, broken only by the dim emergency lights near the exits. The back door creaked as he pushed it open, stepping into the cool night air. The parking lot was empty except for his truck, sitting alone under the oak trees. Shadows stretched long across the cracked asphalt, dancing in the weak light from distant street lamps. "Katie?" he called out, trying to keep his voice casual. "You out here?" Nothing but crickets answered. He shifted his duffel bag, suddenly aware of how isolated this spot was. The back of the gym faced woods, hidden from the main road. Perfect for a secret meeting. Or something else. Movement caught his eye. A figure stepped out from behind the dumpsters, shorter than him, wearing a black hoodie with the hood pulled low. He squinted, trying to make out features in the dim light. "Katie? That you being shy?" He forced a laugh, but something felt wrong. The figure wasn't moving like a cheerleader. Their stance was different, balanced, ready. "What's the matter?" he called out, covering his growing unease with bravado. "Thought we were going to talk about—" The figure moved. One moment, they were 10 feet away. The next, they were inside his guard. He barely had time to raise his hands before a strike hit his solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. His duffel bag hit the ground. He tried to swing, but his attacker was too close, too fast. An elbow caught his ribs with surgical precision. Pain exploded through his side. Before he could recover, his arm was grabbed and twisted behind his back, at an impossible angle. Tendons stretched to their limit. "Wait!" he gasped, but whoever held him wasn't interested in talking. His feet left the ground as his attacker used his own momentum against him. The world spun. His shoulders screamed in protest. Then the pavement rushed up to meet him. He hit hard, the impact rattling his teeth. Stars burst behind his eyes. His arm was still locked in that painful hold, threatening to snap if he struggled. A knee pressed into his back, pinning him down. "Please," he wheezed, real fear replacing his earlier cockiness. "I don't have any money." The pressure increased slightly, sending fresh waves of agony through his twisted arm. The message was clear. Shut up. His attacker held him there for what felt like forever, but was probably only seconds. Just long enough for the pain to really sink in. Just long enough for him to understand how completely helpless he was. Then, the pressure vanished. He rolled onto his back, cradling his throbbing arm, and looked up. The hooded figure stood over him, face hidden in shadow. They were smaller than he'd realized, definitely female, based on the build. She hadn't said a word during the entire attack. She took one step back, then another, melting into the darkness between the trees. Jace lay there, gasping, his ribs screaming with each breath. The whole encounter had lasted less than 30 seconds. Minutes passed before he managed to sit up. His phone had fallen from his pocket during the attack. With shaking fingers, he tried to dial 911 but stopped. What would he say? That some girl had just destroyed him in a fight? That he'd been taken down so fast he barely knew what happened? The back door of the gym opened, spilling light across the parking lot. Mr. Rodriguez, the night janitor, stepped out with his garbage cart. "Hey! Someone help!" Jace called out, his voice breaking. "I was attacked!" The janitor hurried over, already pulling out his phone. "What happened? Who did this?" Jace shook his head, wincing at the movement. I don't know. Someone jumped me, came out of nowhere." As the janitor called for help, Jace stared into the darkness where his attacker had vanished. His shoulder throbbed, and each breath sent spikes of pain through his ribs. But worse than the physical pain was the dawning realization. Someone had targeted him specifically. Someone had waited for him to be alone. Someone had wanted him to feel exactly this helpless. Across town, in a familiar garage, Amara knelt on the training mat. Her knuckles were red, her breathing steady. The hood of her black sweatshirt was pulled back, revealing eyes that held no celebration, only cold satisfaction. "One down," she whispered, her voice barely disturbing the quiet. The hallways buzzed with whispers. Tuesday morning. Students huddled in tight groups, phones out, sharing details of what happened to Jace. He wasn't in school. His mom had posted on Facebook about taking him to the ER for x-rays. "I heard his arm's basically destroyed," a freshman girl whispered to her friend by the water fountain. "My cousin works at the hospital," another student chimed in. "Said Jace was crying when they brought him in." Bryce slammed his locker shut, making nearby students jump. His face was tight with anger as he turned to Connor, who was leaning against the wall trying to look unbothered. "This isn't random," Bryce muttered, checking over his shoulder. "Someone's sending a message." Connor shifted uncomfortably. "Come on, man. You're being paranoid. Probably just some thugs from the east side looking to jack his truck." "Nothing was stolen, genius." Bryce's voice dropped lower. "They didn't take his phone, his wallet, nothing. Just beat him down and left him there." "That sound like a robbery to you?" Before Connor could respond, the crowd in the hallway parted slightly. Amara walked past them, her backpack slung over one shoulder. She didn't look their way, didn't change her pace, but something about her calm demeanor made Connor's stomach twist. "You don't think—" he started, but Bryce cut him off. "That girl?" Bryce forced a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "No way. You saw her in gym class. She can barely run laps without tripping." But doubt had crept into his voice. They watched her disappear around the corner, her footsteps unhurried. "Maybe we should tell someone about the locker thing," Connor suggested. "Just in case." "Shut up," Bryce snapped. "No one would believe us anyway. Besides, you really want to admit we got scared of some girl?" The warning bell rang, scattering students to their classes. Connor headed to chemistry, his mind racing. During lab, his phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. "Hey there, handsome. Saw you at the track meet last week. Want to meet up tomorrow? I know a private spot." Connor's heart rate picked up. He glanced around the classroom, but everyone was focused on their experiments. He typed back, "Who is this?" The response came quickly. "Someone who's been watching you. Weight room during 5th period? I know you have study hall then." He hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Something felt off, but his ego wouldn't let him back down. What if it was that cute junior from the swim team? She'd been eyeing him at lunch lately. "How do I know you're real?" he typed. A photo appeared. A girl in shadow, just the curve of a smile visible. The timestamp showed it was taken today, in what looked like the school bathroom. Connor grinned. "Tomorrow at 1:30, he wrote back. "Don't be late." The rest of the day passed in a blur of anticipation. He barely noticed when Bryce tried to discuss theories about Jace's attack at lunch. His mind was on tomorrow's meeting. That evening, in her bedroom, Amara sat cross-legged on her bed. Her phone showed the burner app she'd used to message Connor, the fake profile already deleted. On her desk, a small bottle of Tiger Balm sat next to fresh hand wraps. She worked the oil into her knuckles methodically, checking the bruising from last night. The skin was tender, but healing well. Her father had taught her how to care for her hands after training. They were weapons, and weapons needed maintenance. "You good?" her father's voice carried up from downstairs. Amara flexed her fingers, feeling the strength in them. Tomorrow, they would remind Connor what it felt like to be trapped and helpless. Tomorrow, another bully would learn about consequences. "Almost," she called back, her voice steady and sure. The weight room door creaked as Connor pushed it open. His footsteps echoed in the empty space, mixing with the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. The room smelled of rubber mats and old metal, familiar from countless workouts, but something felt different today. "Hello?" His voice bounced off the concrete walls. "Anyone here?" The door clicked shut behind him. Connor spun around, heart suddenly racing. Through the small window, the hallway looked deserted. Everyone else was in fifth period. He pulled out his phone, checking the mysterious messages again. 1:30. He was right on time. The lights flickered once, twice. Connor's mouth went dry. "Hey, this isn't funny." The overhead lights went out completely, leaving only the dim glow from the hallway filtering through the window. Before he could reach for the door, something hard struck the back of his knee. His leg buckled. A figure in dark clothes moved like a shadow, too fast to track. Connor tried to throw a punch, but his fist met empty air. Sharp pain exploded across his face as an elbow connected with his nose. Hot blood sprayed down his chin. "What the?" He stumbled backward, crashing into a rack of dumbbells. They clattered to the floor around him. The attacker moved with practiced precision. A knee drove into his stomach, driving the air from his lungs. As he doubled over, gasping, hands grabbed his arm and twisted. His shoulder screamed in protest. "Stop!" Connor's voice cracked. "Please!" The figure paused, still holding his arm at a painful angle. In the dim light, he could make out a black hoodie, gloves, a face hidden in shadow. But the build was smaller than he expected. Definitely not some thug from across town. A voice whispered near his ear, soft but sharp as steel. "You remember that locker?" Connor's blood turned to ice. The voice was feminine, controlled, familiar. It was dark in there too, wasn't it? The grip on his arm tightened. Cramped, suffocating. Like this? His knee exploded in agony as a precise strike hyperextended the joint. Connor screamed, but a gloved hand muffled the sound. "Now you know how it feels to be trapped." The pressure on his arm released. Connor collapsed to the floor, clutching his ruined knee. Through tears of pain, he saw the figure slip toward the door. A key turned in the lock. When had they taken his key? And the door opened silently. Just before disappearing, the attacker paused. "Tell your friend Bryce he's next." Then Connor was alone in the semi-darkness, blood dripping onto the rubber mat beneath him. His phone had skittered under a weight bench during the attack. He could barely move to reach it. 5 minutes later, a janitor found him curled up on the floor, sobbing and muttering about shadows and lockers. His nose was definitely broken, and his knee would need surgery. The school nurse called an ambulance, while the principal demanded answers Connor couldn't give. Outside, rain fell in heavy sheets across the parking lot. Amara walked home under her black hoodie, her shoes soaking wet, but her steps steady. She kept her face down, avoiding the occasional passing car, but her expression remained perfectly calm. In her pocket, Connor's key ring clinked softly with each step. The rain washed away any traces she might have left behind. Footprints, blood drops, evidence. But it couldn't wash away the memory of fear in Connor's eyes when he finally understood, when he felt what true helplessness was like. 2 down, she thought, letting the rain mask her presence. 1 to go. Bryce paced the empty locker room, his cleats clicking against the tile floor. The rest of the team had left practice an hour ago, but he couldn't bring himself to leave. Not with everything falling apart. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Connor, all caps. "They know it was us. Someone's coming for us." "Shut up," Bryce muttered, typing back. "Man up. You probably just got jumped by some random." But his hands were shaking. First Jace with his broken ribs, now Connor with a busted knee. Both attacked in empty rooms, both unable to identify their attacker, both terrified. The door creaked open, and Bryce nearly jumped out of his skin. It was just Mike, another player, coming back for his forgotten phone charger. "You okay, man?" Mike asked, noting Bryce's pale face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Something in Bryce snapped. The pressure, the fear, the need to explain. It all came pouring out. You want to know what's really going on? Bryce grabbed Mike's shoulder, voice low and urgent. That new girl, Amara? Last Friday, we taught her a lesson. Me, Connor, and Jace. Mike's eyes widened. What are you talking about? We locked her in one of those old gym lockers overnight? Bryce's laugh was hollow, desperate. She was getting too proud, you know, thinking she could just come here and act like she belonged. So we shut her up for a while. You did what? Mike stepped back, disgust clear on his face. She deserved it. Bryce's voice echoed off the walls. But now something's happening. Someone's picking us off one by one. Jace can barely breathe. Connor needs surgery. And He stopped, suddenly aware of Mike's phone, held low at his side, recording. Delete that, Bryce growled, reaching for the phone. But Mike was already backing away, thumbs flying across the screen. You're sick, man, all of you. I said delete it, Bryce lunged, but Mike slipped out the door. Within minutes, Bryce's phone exploded with notifications. The video was spreading through group chats like wildfire. His confession, his fear, his guilt, all of it exposed. He slammed his locker shut, breathing hard. This couldn't be happening. His father was on the school board. He was supposed to be untouchable. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. The message was simple. Midnight. Practice field. Bring your pride. Bryce stared at the words until they burned into his vision. Another buzz. Come alone, or don't come at all. His fingers trembled as he typed. Who is this? The response came instantly. You know who. Across town, Amara stood in her garage, watching her father adjust the heavy bag. I might be home late tonight, she said quietly. He paused, studying her face. They hadn't spoken much since she'd escaped the locker, but he'd helped her train harder than ever. He knew this day was coming. Be smart, he said finally. I am. Amara's voice was steady. This ends tonight. He nodded once, then reached into his gym bag. Here. He handed her a roll of hand tape. Protect those knuckles. You've got class tomorrow. A ghost of a smile crossed her face as she took the tape. The garage was quiet, except for the sound of tape tearing, wrapping, securing. Her movements were precise, practiced, each layer a promise of what was to come. When she finished, she pulled on her black hoodie, freshly washed, no evidence left from previous encounters. Her belt, midnight black with gold embroidery, tied snug around her waist underneath. This one, she whispered, flexing her taped fists, is for the locker. Midnight draped itself over the empty football field like a heavy curtain. Fog rolled in thick waves across the grass, turning the familiar terrain into something otherworldly. The metal bleachers gleamed dully under the half-moon, casting long shadows that seemed to reach like fingers across the turf. Bryce's footsteps crunched on the frost-covered grass as he made his way to midfield. His Letterman jacket offered little protection against the cold, but that wasn't why he was shivering. Every few steps, he glanced over his shoulder, jumping at the creaks and groans of the old stadium around him. Hello? His voice came out smaller than he intended. I got your message. I'm here. Only silence answered. The fog swirled around his ankles, making him feel like he was wading through a ghostly river. The stadium lights remained dark, leaving only the moon to cast its pale glow over the scene. Movement caught his eye, a shadow detaching itself from the darkness near the end zone. A figure in black, face hidden behind a mask, walking with deliberate steps toward him. Bryce's laugh was sharp and nervous. So, what is this? Some kind of joke? The figure said nothing, continuing its steady approach. You think you can scare me? His voice rose, echoing off the empty bleachers. I own this field. I'm the star quarterback. You're nothing but... The figure reached up and removed the mask. Bryce's words died in his throat. Amara's face was calm, almost serene in the moonlight. Her eyes, though, they burned with something that made his stomach turn to ice. "You—" He stumbled back a step. "But we locked you in a locker?" Her voice was soft, but carried across the field like steel on stone. "Yeah, you did." She shrugged off her hoodie, revealing the black belt tied around her waist. Her hands, wrapped in white tape, formed tight fists at her sides. "This is crazy," Bryce said, trying to recover his swagger. "You really think you can take me?" "I'm twice your size." Amara's stance shifted subtly, her weight balanced perfectly. "Size isn't everything, Bryce. Want to see what skill looks like?" He charged at her with a roar, thinking to end this quickly with his superior strength. But Amara moved like water, sliding past his grab and delivering 3 sharp strikes to his ribs that left him gasping. "That's for the first day," she said quietly. "When you accidentally knocked my books down." Bryce swung wildly, but she wasn't there. A sweep took his legs out from under him, and he crashed hard onto the turf. "That's for the milk you spilled on my lunch." He scrambled up, fury replacing fear. This time he managed to grab her arm, thinking he had her. But Amara turned into his grip, using his own momentum to throw him over her hip. He landed with a heavy thud that drove the air from his lungs. "That's for every time you called me names when you thought I couldn't hear." The fight continued under the moonlight, a brutal dance of precision versus power. Bryce landed a few hits. He wasn't weak by any means, but for every blow he scored, Amara delivered 3 more. Each strike was calculated, targeting weak points she'd studied in years of training. His nose broke under a perfectly timed cross. His knee twisted from a precise kick. His shoulder dislocated when he tried to tackle her, and she used his weight against him. Finally, Bryce collapsed onto the frost-covered grass, blood streaming from his nose, his body a map of pain. "Please," he gasped. "Stop." Amara stood over him, barely breathing hard. "That's funny. I said the same thing when you slammed that locker door. Did you stop?" "I'm sorry." His voice cracked. "We shouldn't have. I didn't mean—" "Save it." She crouched beside him, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You put me in a locker. Now I'm in your head." Without another word, she stood, picked up her hoodie, and walked off into the night. The fog swallowed her silently, leaving Bryce alone with his pain and the knowledge that his world would never be the same. The last thing he saw before passing out was her shadow, merging with the darkness beyond the field, disappearing like a ghost into the midnight air. Morning sunlight streamed through the hallway windows, casting long rectangles of light across the linoleum floors. Students clustered in tight groups, heads bent together, phones out, voices hushed but excited. Amara walked through the main entrance, her backpack slung over one shoulder, moving with the same quiet grace she always had. But something was different today. The way people's eyes followed her, not with mockery or dismissal, but with a new kind of attention. "Did you hear?" a sophomore whispered to her friend as Amara passed. "All 3 of them are out sick." "Sick?" Another voice chimed in. "Jace's got broken ribs. Connor can barely walk. And Bryce? His face looks like he went 10 rounds with a pro fighter." Amara kept walking, her face neutral, but her ears caught every word. She reached her locker and began working the combination lock when her phone buzzed. A link to a voice recording was spreading through the school's group chats like wildfire. Bryce's voice, slightly slurred from what sounded like a party, filled her earbuds. "Yeah, we locked that new girl in the gym locker overnight. Should have heard her begging to get out. Thought it'd teach her to know her place." Laughter followed. Then Connor's voice. "Man, that was wild. She probably spent the whole night crying." The recording continued, detailing every moment of their cruelty. Amara closed her eyes briefly, then deleted the message. She didn't need to hear it again. She'd lived it. By third period, the recording had reached every student's phone. The whispers grew louder, more pointed. Teachers noticed the unusual tension, the way students kept glancing at their phones, then at empty seats where Bryce, Connor, and Jace usually sat. "Ms. Fields?" a voice called out as Amara left her English class. It was Ms. Carter, the school counselor, standing in her doorway with a concerned expression. "Could you come speak with me for a moment?" Amara followed her into the small office, taking a seat in the worn leather chair across from the desk. Ms. Carter closed the door and sat down, her face serious but kind. "I'm sure you're aware of the recording that's been circulating," Ms. Carter began, folding her hands on her desk. "And given recent events with Bryce, Connor, and Jace, is something wrong with them?" Amara's voice was perfectly level, her expression one of mild concern. Ms. Carter studied her face. "They've all reported being attacked over the past week. And now, this recording surfaces, describing what they did to you." She paused. "Amara, if you know anything about what happened to them, that must have been terrible for them," Amara said softly, her posture relaxed but alert. "Being attacked like that, almost as terrible as being locked in a locker overnight." "So it did happen?" Miss Carter leaned forward. "Why didn't you report it?" Amara met her gaze steadily. "Would it have mattered? Bryce's father is on the school board. They've been harassing me since I arrived, and no one said a word. And now they're all injured," Ms. Carter pressed. "Did you have anything to do with that?" "Ms. Carter," Amara's voice remained calm, almost sympathetic. "I'm a 17-year-old girl. Are you suggesting I somehow took down 3 varsity athletes? That sounds pretty far-fetched, doesn't it?" The counselor sat back, frustrated but unable to argue with the logic. "If you're being threatened, or if you're afraid—" "I'm not afraid of anything," Amara interrupted gently. "And I haven't been threatened. It seems like karma finally caught up with them, that's all." "Karma doesn't usually leave people with broken bones," Miss Carter pointed out. Amara stood up, adjusting her backpack. "Sometimes the universe has a way of balancing things out. Is there anything else you need from me?" "Ms. Carter sighed, shaking her head. "No, you can go. But Amara, my door is always open if you want to talk." "Thank you," Amara said, and meant it. "But I think everything's going to be just fine now." She stepped out into the hallway, where students quickly pretended they hadn't been trying to listen through the door. As she walked to her next class, she noticed the change immediately. People moved aside to let her pass. Some nodded respectfully. Others watched with a mix of awe and uncertainty. A freshman who'd once laughed at Bryce's jokes scrambled to pick up books he'd dropped before Amara could pass. "Sorry," he mumbled, pressing himself against the lockers. Near the water fountain, she overheard 2 seniors talking. "Man, whoever did that to Bryce? They say he was crying when they found him on the field." "Guess he's not so tough after all," came the reply. "Bet he won't be pushing anyone around anymore." Amara continued walking, her steps measured and confident. The halls that had once felt like a gauntlet now parted before her like water. She didn't smile, didn't gloat, didn't change her behavior at all. She didn't have to. The balance had shifted all on its own. At her locker, she caught her reflection in the small magnetic mirror inside the door. The same quiet girl looked back at her, but something had changed in her eyes. They held a certainty that hadn't been there before, a knowledge that justice, when it came, didn't always need to announce itself. She closed her locker and headed to class, leaving whispers and speculation in her wake. The hallway that had once echoed with cruel laughter now hummed with a different kind of energy. Respect tinged with just enough fear to keep the peace. The next morning, Principal Harding's office buzzed with tension. Board members sat around the conference table, their faces grim as they watched the recording for the third time. Bryce's voice filled the room again, bragging about trapping Amara in the locker. "Turn it off," Board President Wilson said, rubbing his temples. "We've heard enough." Mrs. Martinez, the student affairs coordinator, spread out a stack of papers. "We've received 12 separate complaints from students about the incident. Several witnessed the boys leading Amara to the gym that day." "This is ridiculous," Mr. Langston, Bryce's father, cut in. He adjusted his expensive tie and leaned forward. "My son is the victim here. Someone attacked these boys, broke bones, caused serious injuries, and we all know who had a motive." Principal Harding raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting Ms. Fields, a single student, somehow overpowered 3 varsity athletes?" "She must have had help," Connor's mother insisted. "Gang members, maybe. These urban transfers—" "Mrs. Peterson," Board Member Chen interrupted sharply. "Let's stick to facts, not stereotypes." The door opened, and Ms. Carter entered with a thick folder. "I have the disciplinary records you requested." She laid them on the table. Multiple incidents of harassment reported by teachers, though no official action was taken. Racial slurs overheard by staff. Physical intimidation in the hallways. Mr. Langston's face reddened. "This is a witch hunt. Where's the proof my son did anything wrong?" "That recording could be fake. Your son admitted it was real when questioned," Principal Harding replied calmly. "He seemed quite proud of it at the time." "And what about these attacks?" Jace's father demanded. "Are we just going to ignore?" "The police found no evidence linking anyone to your son's injuries," Board Member Wilson cut in. "No witnesses, no cameras caught anything. The boys themselves can't identify who hurt them." Mrs. Martinez opened another file. "What we do have evidence of is systematic harassment, culminating in false imprisonment. The locker incident could have been fatal. No ventilation, no water. Overnight in a sealed metal box." The room fell silent as that sank in. "The board recommends immediate suspension for all 3 boys," Wilson announced, "pending further review of their status for the remainder of the year." Mr. Langston shot to his feet. "This is outrageous. Do you know who I am?" "I'll have your job for this." His voice rose to a shout as he jabbed his finger at Principal Harding. A student passing by the office held up their phone, recording through the glass wall. Mr. Langston's face went from red to purple when he noticed. "Mr. Langston," Principal Harding said evenly, "please lower your voice and take your seat, or I'll have to ask security to escort you out." "You can't do this," he sputtered, but sat down heavily. "My son has college scouts looking at him. His whole future." "Should have thought about that before locking a girl in a locker overnight," Board Member Chen said coldly. The meeting concluded shortly after. As the adults filed out, Miss Carter lingered behind. "What about Amara?" she asked quietly. "The boy's parents might try to retaliate legally." Principal Harding shook his head. "They have no proof she was involved in anything. And after that recording went viral, they'd be foolish to draw more attention to what their sons did." Outside in the hallway, students watched the parade of angry parents storming out of the building. Phones captured Mr. Langston's continued ranting in the parking lot, his threats now focused on lawsuits and media exposure. Amara arrived at school just as the commotion was dying down. She climbed the front steps, her steps measured and confident. For the first time since she'd started at the school, she didn't scan the entrance for threats, didn't tense up at sudden movements, didn't clutch her backpack straps like a shield. The heavy doors swung open easily under her hand. Inside, the usual morning chaos flowed around her, but it felt different now. Students nodded as she passed. A teacher who had once looked away from Bryce's taunts smiled warmly. "Hey, Amara," called out Lisa, a quiet girl from her English class. "Want to sit with us at lunch today?" Amara smiled. A real smile, not the careful one she'd worn like armor all these months. "Yeah," she said. "I'd like that." She reached her locker and opened it smoothly, no longer worried about who might be lurking nearby. The hallway that had once felt like enemy territory now just felt like a school hallway. Nothing more, nothing less. As she gathered her books for first period, she caught fragments of conversations around her. Did you see Bryce's dad completely lose it? All three of them suspended. Serves them right after what they did. But Amara didn't need to listen anymore. She didn't need to track threats or plan escapes. The weight she'd carried since that first day had lifted, replaced by something lighter but stronger. The knowledge that justice, even when it came slowly, could still come. She closed her locker and headed to class, her footsteps echoing with quiet confidence through the halls that were finally, truly, just halls. The afternoon sun slanted through the gym's high windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Amara stood in the doorway, her hand resting on the metal frame. This was the first time she'd walked in here voluntarily since that night. The space felt different now. Smaller, maybe. Less threatening. The storage room door hung open, lockers visible inside. She walked toward them slowly, her footsteps echoing in the empty gym. "Ms. Fields?" Coach Bryant's voice made her turn. He stood by the bleachers, a clipboard in his hand, looking uncomfortable. The man who had turned away so many times now couldn't quite meet her eyes. "I was just leaving," Amara said quietly. "Actually," he cleared his throat, "I wanted to talk to you about the after-school self-defense club." Amara raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "Look," he continued, shifting his weight. "What happened? I should have seen it. Should have stopped it. I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't change anything," Amara replied evenly. "No, it doesn't," he nodded. "But maybe this could. We need someone with real experience to help teach. Someone who knows what it's actually like to—" He gestured vaguely at the storage room. "To be trapped?" Amara finished for him. "To need more than just basic moves?" "Yes." He met her eyes finally. "These girls, they need someone who understands. Not just techniques, but why they matter." Amara walked to the center of the gym, looking up at the ceiling where she'd stared for hours that night, planning her revenge. "You want me to teach?" "To help teach," he corrected. "Show them what you know, what works in real situations." She turned back to him. "On one condition." "Name it." "We make it real," she said firmly. "No watered-down moves. No pretending the world is safer than it is. They learn to actually defend themselves." Coach Bryant nodded slowly. "Agreed." The next day, Amara arrived at the gym after school. A group of about 15 girls sat on the bleachers, talking quietly among themselves. She recognized most of them, the ones who walked quickly between classes, who avoided certain hallways, who never went to the bathroom alone. "Ladies," Coach Bryant called out, "this is Amara Fields. She'll be helping teach from now on." The girls looked at her with a mix of curiosity and recognition. The story of what happened in the locker, and what happened after, had spread through the school like wildfire. "First thing," Amara said, stepping forward, "forget everything you think you know about self-defense. This isn't about looking tough or knowing fancy moves. It's about survival, about power, about never being a victim." She demonstrated a simple wrist-grab escape, showing how leverage mattered more than strength. The girls paired up, practicing the movement. Amara moved among them, adjusting grips, correcting stances. "More pressure," she told Lisa, who was working with a freshman named Maya. "Your attacker won't be gentle. Neither should you." By the end of the hour, the girls were sweating but focused. Something had shifted in their eyes, a spark of understanding, of possibility. "Next week," Amara announced, We learn about pressure points and weak spots. Real ones, not the movie kind. The club met 3 times a week. Word spread quickly. More girls joined. Then some boys, too. Mostly smaller ones who knew what it felt like to be targeted. Coach Bryant watched from the sidelines as Amara taught them not just techniques, but awareness, strategy, control. One afternoon, a month later, 25 students gathered to watch Amara demonstrate a takedown. She positioned herself in front of Coach Bryant, who had agreed to help. "The key isn't strength," she explained as he grabbed her from behind. "It's using their own force against them." In one fluid movement, she shifted her weight, twisted, and sent him sprawling to the mat. The students murmured appreciatively. Coach Bryant got up, rubbing his shoulder but nodding in approval. "Notice I didn't get angry," Amara continued. "Didn't waste energy on fear or rage. It's not about emotion. It's about control. About knowing exactly what you're doing and why." She helped a pair of students practice the move, making sure they understood the mechanics. "Your body is a weapon," she told them, "but your mind controls it. Never forget that." The gym had become a different place now. Not just a space for sports or socializing, but a sanctuary where strength was built, where confidence grew. The storage room door stayed open, the lockers inside now holding training gear instead of secrets. Students who had once hurried through the halls now walked with purpose. They carried themselves differently, not aggressively, but with quiet assurance. The whispered warnings about which areas to avoid, which people to fear, gradually faded. One day, as the club wrapped up their session, a freshman girl approached Amara. "My mom wants to know if you'd consider teaching an evening class," she said, "for women in the community." Amara looked around the gym, at the mats where students practiced falls, at the training pads worn smooth with use, at the faces now bright with sweat and determination. "Tell her yes," she replied, "but remind her what I always say here." The girl nodded, finishing the phrase that had become the club's unofficial motto. "It's not about anger. It's about control." The morning sun painted the sky in shades of promise as Amara stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting her graduation gown. The gold sash draped across her shoulder caught the light, a symbol of academic excellence that meant more than just grades. It represented survival, growth, victory. Her mother called from downstairs, "Amara, your father's here." She took one last look in the mirror, straightened her cap, and headed down. Her father stood in the living room, holding a long, narrow box wrapped in black paper with a golden ribbon. "Before we head to the ceremony," he said, his voice steady but his eyes bright, "I have something for you." Amara took the box, feeling its weight in her hands. The paper came away easily, revealing a polished wooden case. Inside, nestled in red velvet, lay a new black belt. But this wasn't just any belt. It was custom-made, the fabric thick and pristine. Along its length, golden thread spelled out words that made her throat tight. Locked in. Broke out. Fought back. "Dad," she whispered, running her fingers over the embroidery. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You earned this. Not just with training, but with how you handled everything. Smart, controlled, strategic." Her mother stepped closer, looking at the belt. "What does it mean? Locked in?" Amara and her father exchanged a quick glance. Some stories weren't meant for telling. Not yet, anyway. "It's about breaking through barriers," Amara said simply. The drive to school was quiet, the belt carefully folded in her bag. The parking lot was already filling with families in their Sunday best, seniors in royal blue gowns hurrying toward the gymnasium. As Amara walked in with her parents, she noticed how different everything felt from that first day months ago. Inside the gym, the bleachers were packed. Students arranged themselves alphabetically, and Amara took her place in the F section. From here, she could see everyone, including 3 empty seats where Bryce, Connor, and Jace should have been. They'd transferred out weeks ago. Their college athletic scholarships evaporated like morning dew. The principal began his speech, words about future and potential floating through the air-conditioned space. Amara's mind drifted to the storage room behind the stage, to the locker that had changed everything. It wasn't fear she felt anymore when she thought about that night. It was something else, a cool certainty, like the weight of her new belt in her bag. Names began being called. One by one, students walked across the stage, accepted their diplomas, moved their tassels from right to left. When Fields' Amara echoed through the speakers, something unexpected happened. The applause started normal but grew. It swelled, became something more than polite ceremony. Students stood. Parents joined in. Even teachers rose to their feet. This wasn't just for her grades or her sash. This was for everything else. For the changes she'd brought. For the strength she'd taught others to find. She crossed the stage with measured steps, accepted her diploma with a firm handshake, and moved her tassel with deliberate grace. The applause continued until she reached her seat. After the ceremony, families spilled into the parking lot for pictures and goodbyes. Amara posed with her parents, her diploma held high, her gold sash gleaming in the summer sun. As she was about to leave, a freshman girl ran up to her, slightly out of breath. "Wait!" the girl called. "Are you the girl who—" Amara cut her off with a gentle smile. "I'm the girl who doesn't let boys win." The younger student's eyes widened with understanding. She glanced at the self-defense club flyer clutched in her hand, the summer session schedule Amara had helped organize before graduating. "Will you still be teaching?" the girl asked. "Some things are worth coming back for," Amara replied, thinking of all the others who needed to learn what she now knew. Not just about fighting, but about standing tall, about choosing when and how to strike back. Her father called from their car, holding up her bag with the new belt inside. Amara gave the freshman a final nod and turned to leave. The sun was high now, warming her face as she walked across the parking lot. Her head was high, her steps sure. The belt in her bag carried the weight of her story. Not just what had happened to her, but what she'd done about it. She passed the gym one last time, its windows reflecting the bright summer day. Inside those walls, she'd been trapped, emerged, and ultimately transformed the space into something new. A place where others now learned to find their own strength, their own way to fight back. The breeze caught her graduation gown as she walked, making it billow like a flag of victory. She didn't look back at the school. She didn't need to. Her legacy would continue in every girl who learned to stand her ground, in every student who discovered that power wasn't about size or strength, it was about patience, strategy, and the absolute refusal to stay locked away. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.